we're going to cleanse our palates now with hearing the story of a man who's being persecuted in real time for ghost guns. If you don't know who Dexter Taylor is, you're going to know after watching tonight. Dexter, I'm bringing you in. You ready? Here comes our guest. 3, 2, 1. Sir, at the risk of asking the obvious question, how goes the battle?
Hey, all is lovely.
says the man who just got out of a full day of criminal prosecution. You're into. Have you started the actual trial yet, or you've gotten?
Yes, we started. Okay. Yes, we started last week. I mean, this is it's been going on. The proceedings have been going on since April of 2022. Most recently, we finally got through all the preliminaries. The state switched prosecutors on us. They switched judges on us a couple of times. Last week, we finally impaneled the jury, and then Thursday of last week, we started doing opening arguments. So we're in the midst of it.
In the thick of it. Now, I don't even want to get there yet because we got to start all the way at the beginning, going back to your childhood, sir. Okay, so I know your story, but many people out there might not. 30,000 foot overview. Don't worry, Chad. I'm not going to spend a half an hour on childhood, just a few minutes. Who are you for those who don't know?
Sure. My real name is Dexter Taylor. My online nom de guerre is Carbon Mike. I'm a native New Yorker. I'm a 30-year veteran of the software industry. I'm a licensed amateur radio operator, technician class. I'm a studio owner. I'm sitting in the control room of the third recording studio I've built. Had a lot of different jobs. I've taught film school. I started my own film school at one point called Brooklyn Movie Labs. Let's see. I'm a father. I'm a neighbor. I'm a builder. I make a lot of my own furniture. And a few years ago, I got into gunsmithing. I found out that there were people who were taking what they called 80% firearms, legal parts, machining these 80% receivers to completion, then adding other legal parts to turn them into completed firearms. And I was hooked. So started off just making Glock style pistols, and that was pretty awesome. And then I made 8 very sexy AR style rifles, 2 of which were bolt action, one of which was an AR-10, like a big takedown hunting rifle with a removable barrel and a folding stock. I just loved all this stuff. And I also thought that was going to be an entree into my second career. I started developing a lot of kind of systems and products and concepts that I thought I was going to build into real things. Because I thought that it would be pretty awesome to take my expertise as a data engineer, as a software guy, and bring it to the world of weapons science. So, I enrolled in my local gun range, passed the criminal background check, obviously, to be part of my local gun range. I subscribed to Rocket FFL because I wanted to find out what I'd have to do to actually turn this into a real profession, what paperwork I'd have to file, so on and so forth. And again, I was hooked. I was fantasizing about buying land in southern New Hampshire and setting up a gun lab in the woods somewhere and doing all this stuff and meeting all these cool people from the two-way world like Bill Geisley and Kevin, I want to say Brittingham from Q Firearms, so on and so forth. Anyway, all that came to an end when I got raided in April of 2022 by a joint NYPD ATF task force. Basically, a SWAT team broke my door down, arrested me, took me off to Rikers where I spent a week. My bail was almost $250,000. My parents had to put their house up to get me out. And I'm facing now multiple counts of what they call felony weapons possession. In total, I'm looking at 18 years of prison time if I lose my case. And that's it. So obviously we're fighting it. I found, or I should say my ex-wife found me an amazing lawyer, Vinu Varghese, and he's been on side and fighting this case ever since April of 2022.
And I won't harp too long on this, but you're born and raised in New York State, New York City?
New York City, yes, sir.
So you've been there your entire life. I know that you're conservative, but and I'm not sure what that means anymore, other than not being a radical leftist. But politically, have you been conservative your whole life?
Well, that's funny you should ask. I mean, right now, I would call myself a Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington conservative, right? Because I have to say, I really have no use for the GOP. I have no use for the Republican Party. No more than I have for the Democratic Party. Now, you asked a very interesting question. Have I been conservative my whole life? Well, in retrospect, I have been, because and I'm not unique in that. Most guys like me, most black guys like me, have been conservative their whole lives, because we all grew up with parents who were fanatical about education. We all grew up in families that were deeply religious, right? We all grew up going to Sunday school and so on and so forth. We all grew up with elders around us who told us we had to walk right and talk right, because we were representing the race when we went out there. And plus, God is watching. We all grew up around people who just had these values and held them closely. And when we were kids, certainly when I was a kid, and I imagine it's the same for all of my peers, we didn't know it was called conservatism. To us, it was just life. Now, this many years later, and I know this is a tangent because we're talking about my case, but, just a word on my politics. Though people who know me know that I rain on Republicans about as often as I rain on Democrats, maybe even a little bit more, right? I'm like the weather. Like, if you're standing in the wrong place when I show up, you're going to get wet. So be it. Yeah, because I think it's a shame, it's a travesty that we've allowed progressives to take over our cities and to visit so much, as Sonny Johnson calls it, death, poverty, and destruction on our cities. And then we have conservatives who want to turn around and act like the answer to that is to kind of lecture us on conservatism. To your point, people like me grew up conservative. It's the brand that hasn't aligned with the things we already know. So that's...
This is going to be a tangent of a question, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. It's the same phenomenon in the Jewish community, where you typically think it's conservative values, and yet for whatever the reason, I think Jews vote 80+% for Democrats. The black population, despite, I understand that rationale, but I think the black population is like 85% plus that vote Democrat. I beg your pardon.
That's an error. That's not, I can't speak to the Jewish population, but it's not true that the black population votes 80% for, that's not true. It's mathematically false, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, go now. So what is it more like? What do you...
80 or 90% of the black voters who actually show up to vote.
Okay, fine.
Vote for Democrats.
Fine semantics, and you. Okay.
No. Wait.
But understood and duly corrected. Yeah.
Well, no, it's not just. Well, first of all, you say semantics, but remember what I do for a living, right? Semantics is my life, right? I'm a software developer. That's one. But two, the distinction is important, right? Because if 80% of the eligible black voting population of New York, or let's say Boston, because I ran a lot of numbers on Boston, trying to examine whether this thing was true or a lie. If 80% of all eligible black voters in Boston were voting for Democrats, that would mean that the Democrats really had a stranglehold. They had a real serious majority in the city. But that's not true. In the last national election, fewer than half the eligible black voters in Boston actually voted, which means that the Democrats have 80% of maybe 40%. That's not a stranglehold. And if you look at other major American cities, you see exactly the same pattern, right? So why is this important? Because right now, so-called conservatives are having this big argument about whether or not the black vote is worth courting, which I find astounding. And I'm looking at the math, I'm looking at the turnout graphs, and I'm just like, what's wrong with you? It's like so many black voters in American cities are they're just disgusted, like you're disgusted, like everyone's disgusted. And they're sitting out these elections and no one's talking to them. And the reason, believe it or not, I think that's relevant to this case, and to what's happening to me right now, is because we would have a much easier time dislodging these progressives that have brought these insane ideas into our cities and are running our cities into the ground. We'd have a much easier time if conservatives, or people who call themselves conservatives, were serious about building political coalitions with their natural allies. You see what I'm saying? So you have a population that's naturally very religious, that's naturally socially conservative, that is naturally skeptical about government. Right? Because at one time, many of our troubles as black folks in America came from the government. Yeah? And you say you're a conservative, but you can't reach them. Well, that's your fault. It's not, there's not some magical brainwashing machine owned by the Democratic Party that is making conservatives or Republicans, as they call themselves, unable to reach black people. The problem is in the outreach. So, end of rant. But that's
okay.
Now you get the idea of like how much of a pain in the ass I am and why I'm a politically homeless conservative.
Well, and Dexter, we have an amazing community, so I have been told, and you have been criticized on some message boards as being anti-Trump and yada yada, as if anybody should tolerate what's going on just because the person might criticize who your political leader is.
Yeah. I should jump in there and say that I'm not so much anti-Trump as I don't like Trump, but I also think, for example, I'm able to put that aside and look at the matter more or less dispassionately. For example, I really do think the 2020 election was stolen. That's obvious. It was stolen from him. I think he was if they had counted the votes straight up, he would have been the rightful winner. Now, again, I don't like him, but don't steal elections. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I'm all over the place, man. You can't really pin me down because again, I'm a conservative. I lead with the principle. The party, the candidate, these things are instruments. What I want from my country, from my home, from my republic is for conservative values to win. And that's beyond any single election cycle. So
it's that episode of The Simpsons when Homer's ordering the yogurt and the guy in the shop, he's like, "That's good, that's bad." And I could say, "I don't like Trump, that's bad. I think the election." Well, I think we all agreed the election was heavily fortified, and you just gained back the admiration there. No, and I say the political leaning is important here because in one of your interviews, I forget who's it. You talk about like illegal immigrants beat up a cop, they're let out the same day with no bail. You are arrested, you're sent to Rikers, and I got to ask you about that experience, $250,000 bond, and people are going to say, well, there's racial privilege that, people often use these examples of young black criminals getting out, no bail, no nothing, they recommit, and then everyone's like, oh, look how bad the system is. And then you get a man like yourself, where I've always been saying it's not racial privilege, it's political privilege or political prejudice. And we're living in a world now where the politics is taking over, where I think had you been on the other end of the political spectrum with the same frame, you would have gotten a much different treatment than you got as a conservative black man in New York. And I think it's more the conservative.
I actually don't think so. I mean, because I don't have any evidence that they knew about my my online,
No, you just froze. Hold on one second. Let's wait for this.
Is that my report on sanitaire?
Sorry, hold on. You froze for a second. Start again if you don't mind.
Sure. I don't agree with your analysis, and here's why. Before I got raided, I kept a pretty strict cordon sanitaire between my my real life, as Dexter Taylor, binary machines, my software guy, what have you, and Carbon Mike, precisely because I work in the software industry in New York City, and I knew that it would be difficult for me to find work if people knew that I held such conservative views. So I kept the two very separate. I don't see any evidence that the state of New York knew I was Carbon Mike before they raided me. I don't see any evidence that they knew that I was a conservative commentator before there's no.
Okay, interesting.
So I think, but to your point about, here's the thing. We've known, by the way, right? Because again, people complain, conservatives often complain about how, people of a certain color, whatever they do, they offend and reoffend and offend and reoffend. Well, we've in black neighborhoods, we've known about that problem for a long time. And we've been complaining about it for a long time. Nobody wanted to listen. And now that some of those same black knuckleheads have decided to go downtown and cause trouble, now it's a problem. Now it's like, oh my God, what's happening? Now it's a big deal. But we've been complaining. You can go back and listen to Malcolm X's speeches, and he was complaining about it. Nobody wanted to listen. In the same way that, many of my conservative brethren, I'm delighted, by the way, that they finally discovered that the FBI is corrupt and has been weaponized against American citizens. We've known about that for a while now. COINTELPRO happened decades ago, or was started, I should say, decades ago. We've been talking about it for years now. Nobody wanted to listen. Now that they're using these quote unquote tools to go after ordinary law-abiding citizens who are merely upset about, say, pornography in their kids' school library, now it's a problem. We told you it was a problem. You ain't want to listen. In the same sense that, like, a lot of black guys like me, a lot of race men like we were complaining about Black Lives Matter when they first came out. We were like, you know something? These people are the enemy of black progress, because black folks need strong families and need our traditions and need the faith of our fathers to thrive in this country. These people are full of it. You only want to listen. So, this is, like I said, I'm a huge pain in the ass. And that's why, because I'm just, I'm not, like I said, I'm conservative. But, that doesn't mean, a lot of people may think that means I should talk like Candace Owens. I don't talk like Candace Owens because I don't think like Candace Owens. Larry Elder neither. You know what I'm saying?
I like it. First of all, do you speak French? You've used two expressions now. Pardon sanitaire is like an emergency, is a barrier, and nom de guerre is your battle name. All right, well, so you're an engineer, or you're a
software engineer.
Software engineer. So you like to work with moving parts. You like things that would drive other people crazy.
Yeah, that's right.
I think maybe I could get into it, but I'm not going to. But so you get into building your own guns. Now, when does this start? Like, I presume they got wind of you pretty quickly when you developed this passion.
Well, I wouldn't venture a guess as to when exactly they got wind of it, but I'd certainly been building weapons for at least a year, maybe a year and a half. It doesn't feel like 2 years. So maybe a year to a year and a half before I got raided. I was building weapons for that long.
I was once corrected and said, Viva. Someone up in Canada said, Viva, as a Canadian, don't call them weapons, call them firearms. And I've never said it since.
I've heard a lot of people say that. I really don't care. In other words, it's like we have to renormalize society around the idea that, like, dangerous things are okay. Just like we need dangerous things around, because we're the tool using creatures. All tools can be weapons. So are we gonna try to, like, semantically or verbally or rhetorically, I should say, polish the sharp edges off the world to try to present a nicer face? Or are we gonna, like, give it to people straight? They're like, yes, I was building weapons. They are weapons. Yes, they are also firearms because they use fire. They use fire to drive a projectile, but they're weapons. Sure, no problem.
Now they're colloquially called ghost guns, but bottom line, tell us how it works, because I know 3D printing. I don't know the ghost guns where you talk about getting 80% completed and it's not a. Okay.
So first of all, you pronounce traditional guns wrong. Okay, they're traditional guns because they're made in a tradition. There's nothing ghostly about them. First of all, they're very corporeal. You know what I'm saying? And contrary to what the anti-gun people would like you to believe, it's perfectly possible to link a privately manufactured firearm to a crime that firearm was used in. Just think about how many times you've heard people say ballistics match. That's how people tie firearms to crimes where the firearm was discharged in the commission of that crime. You do a ballistics match. You pick up the brass shell casings, if there are any around, and you match those up with the barrel, because each firearm makes distinctive sets of markings on the brass, okay? And voila, you have a firearms match. The serial number is simply an administrative nicety. That's all that is. And actually, according to federal law, you don't have to serialize a weapon unless you produced it for the purposes of selling it or otherwise transferring it. I didn't make any guns in order to transfer them. I didn't talk about guns online. I didn't photograph guns. I didn't hint about guns online. Brandish guns in front of video cameras. In front, you know, like for my Instagram or whatever. I didn't do any of that stuff. Yeah, ghost guns, no. Traditional firearms, yes. They're not ghostly, they're real, and they're traditional. They were made in the traditional way in an American home. That's the first thing, right? So now, yeah, I was, I don't know when they got wind of it, but I know pretty much how they got wind of it, which was that the ATF has been going around getting customer lists from parts manufacturers and then liaising with local police departments and kind of driving these warrants like, hey, well, this guy's doing something. And then the police, local PD will take over, and the local AG, whoever, will take over, and then or the local DA will take over and issue whatever subpoenas and get that whole thing in motion. And eventually what that results in is a search warrant like the one that was executed against me, right, or against my house. And, you know, SWAT team will show up, break down your door, and take you off to jail. And
now, I don't want to ask too many details because it'll be not necessarily useful for this, but I hear my dog barking. What is the process of building one of these guns at home? Like, where do you get what components from? How much do you need from, like, where does the skeleton come from? Because you have to work with something, or do you get every individual component?
I see what you mean. Yeah. So my weapons were not 3D printed. I had a 3D printer, which they took. But the irony is I never used it to build firearms, right? In fact, I hardly ever used it at all. I remember building like the demo print that comes in the firmware, and then I didn't use it. I actually bought that, believe it or not, to build things like replacement knobs and buttons and what have you for the gear in my recording studio. You can't really see it here, but you
hold on,
get
I can
idea.
Zoom out a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So right, you get the idea. Okay. So what's involved? Well, you take let's say a lower receiver. Now a lower receiver. Every lower receiver starts as really a blank, what they call a billet, you know, a featureless piece of metal, usually aluminum. And then it's machined and milled away until it looks like, for example, the lower receiver for an AR-15. By contrast, if you're making pistols, then the material of the receiver is not aluminum. It's usually glass-infused plastic. They call it polymer, but it's basically, you know, glass and something like nylon. And having a particular shape, it is designed to incorporate various parts, such as, you know, the springs, the rails on which the slide of the pistol sits. And you know, you can take this part and add parts, drill holes in it, and you'll end up with a finished firearm. Now, the trick is this. According to the federal government, it is only that receiver, the lower receiver, that qualifies as a firearm. When you buy a completed firearm online, it is that lower receiver that is serialized. That is the thing that is classified as a firearm according to the ATF. Okay. So when you're buying something that's not a lower receiver, because you can't simply add parts to it, you have to do additional work to it to enable it to receive those additional parts that would make it operable. That is what's colloquially known as an 80% receiver. The 80 isn't a hard number. It's just meant to signify that most of the work has been done, but some has yet to be done, right? So you have to drill some holes. In the case of an AR-15 lower, an 80% lower, you have to machine out some material because it's solid in the center where the trigger group would go. So you've got to machine all that out, drill your holes, do whatever, and then you can start adding your parts. In the case of a Glock, typically it also looks like a finished lower receiver, and there's some pieces of plastic, pieces of polymer you need to cut away and polish away and grind away, and then drill holes so then it can receive the rest of the parts that would turn it into a functional weapon. So that's how that goes.
Okay, so I mean, the ghost gun then is sort of like the assault rifle misnomer. This more like sounds like you're buying a kit and you're assembling it at home and you can customize it to some extent.
That is correct. That's exactly correct. Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
And then
not ghostly at all. Yeah.
And then this is going to explain exactly how, despite the fact that they call it a ghost gun, they were able to track you down quite easily, because the people who sell you the kits take your information and then gave it over to the authorities.
Not just kits, but even unitary parts. Like, for example, I bought a lot of my barrels from a company called Brownells. I bought a lot of my Glock-style slides and barrels from a company called MDX Arms, so on and so forth. So, you can get your lowers from anywhere. It is possible also to 3D print lower receivers, but that involves some engineering problems, some complex engineering problems. And your techniques and the materials you use and what have you will have a lot to do with how reliable the finished weapon is. But it's only really the lower receiver that can be machined. In the case of polymer lower receivers, plastic receivers, you can 3D print them. But remember that a 3D printer is essentially, a basic layered deposition printer is kind of like it's kind of like the love child of a hot glue gun and a robot. That's really what it is, And so what you can do is you can lay down layers of plastic one after the other until finally you've built up some structure, and then you can polish that structure, what have you. But the fine structure of what you've built is still down to the process. In other words, it's still a layer cake of pieces of plastic, thousands and thousands of layers of plastic. And it turns out that when you get down to some of the more hardcore parts of a firearm, right, the fine structure of the part really matters. So, for example, the bolt and the bolt carrier group, we call it the bolt carrier group, of let's say an AR rifle. It's not possible to make that out of plastic. Well, you could make it out of plastic, but no sane person would actually put that together and fire it. Right? Because why? Because what's happening inside the chamber when that bolt locks up on your chambered round and then you pull the trigger, the firing pin smacks the primer. You've got this expansion of hot gas in there that's basically, that's spiking up the pressure inside that chamber to maybe 10, 15, 20,000 pounds per square inch. By contrast, air pressure at sea level is about 15 pounds between 14 and 15 pounds per square inch, right? So you've got this miniature pressure cooker, right? Getting fired up 6 inches in front of your face. Do you want a piece of plastic in there, or do you want a piece of like highly engineered tool steel in there? Well, the answer is your bolt has to be made of steel, and not just any steel either. So it's some of the things that when people talk about privately manufactured firearms, some of what is spoken about is highly overblown. I don't know of anyone who would 3D print an actual barrel. Like you want your barrel to be steel. I mean, you just do. You want your bolt carrier group to be steel. You can get away with plastic lowers and maybe even some plastic uppers, but that's kind of what it is. And also, there's no such thing as a firearm like a porcelain firearm or a ceramic firearm or an all-plastic firearm that can evade detection. That's a myth. It's like any firearm that's reliable in any way is going to be detectable by normal detection means known to us already. So,
and from what you're saying, I just saw a video of RPG misfiring. Apparently, a Ukrainian soldier was testing it, and the way the man was, he was dead before he hit the ground. So I can imagine what a misfiring firearm would look like. Okay, so you're doing this, but I also you are a certified. Did I understand from one of the interviews that you're FFL certified, or that you're FFL?
No.
Okay.
No.
So
I had signed up. I had subscribed to a service called Rocket FFL.
Okay.
This is an educational service that educates you about FFLs. So, for example, I didn't know before that, like, there are, I think, 4 or 5 different kinds of FFLs, and then there's a separate thing called SOT, Specialized occupational taxpayer, something like that. That's if you want to deal with exotic weapons like grenade launchers and what have you. But I signed up for that service so that I could learn what I would have to do to actually apply for my FFL and be successful. And that was when I realized, yeah, you're going to have to get some land in New Hampshire somewhere, because, no one's like the FFL is linked to a particular site. The government ATF will come and do a site survey, and the site has to be suitable for an FFL to operate there. So obviously, I'm in a highly dense residential area. You're not going to apply for an FFL here. I thought, hey, New Hampshire, great place. Somewhere outside of Nashua or Manchester. Yeah.
Okay, very cool.
No, not an FFL. Yeah.
Okay, that clarifies my misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
And now, so you're into this for a bit.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any idea, any inkling? I mean, it's a stupid question. Do you have any idea that what you're doing could be deemed to be illegal?
Of course not. Why would it? In other words, I know I'm not a prohibited person. We're not talking about carrying weapons around. That's different, right? In other words, I knew, and I didn't agree with it, but I knew it, and I wasn't going to get into a pissing contest with New York State. I knew that carrying weapons around was illegal unless you had a permit. Right. Again, I didn't agree with that either, but I wasn't going to test New York. I'm not an activist. You see what I'm saying? So I knew that but I wasn't carrying weapons around. None of my weapons left my house. Right now, I also knew that buying firearms in New York State was illegal. I didn't agree with that either, but I didn't try to buy any firearms. I didn't buy any firearms. I bought parts and I bought legal parts and I put them together. I bought legal parts online under my own name and had them shipped to my house. So no, why would I think that a perfectly peaceable, law-abiding citizen with no criminal record, right, is a felon because he manufactures an object that the law of this land says is legal, that he has a right to keep and bear? Why would I think that would be illegal?
It's very interesting that you phrase it that way. You're buying parts. I presume that some of them are from out of state. I don't really think that would make a difference, but you're buying
Most of them are from out of state, yeah.
You're buying legal components
parts
that are being sold on the open market.
Correct.
There
and
can only be
them to my house, right?
There's only one reason why people are selling these parts online, and it's not so that you can use them as a fishing barrel or something.
They're firearms components. They're barrels and triggers and springs and so on. Of course, yes.
I'm trying to steel man the idea here. They're being sold and offered to individuals, so they're not even only for gun shops for repairs.
No.
The argument might be that it's only for repairing your own firearm if you're allowed to legally own one in the state. So you're doing this for a little while, and you've manufactured, from what the article said, Dexter, an arsenal. You had a flipping arsenal. An arsenal in your New York, I don't remember where it was, Bronx apartment.
Not the Bronx, Brooklyn. I live in Brooklyn.
Okay. So
yeah.
What was, I presume you're allowed, and I told you I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. If you can't answer anything,
don't worry
please.
about it. I made I want to say 5, 6, 7 pistols and 8 AR style rifles. 7 AR-15 style, 1 AR-10.
Once they're done and completed, you enjoy looking at them, that's the purpose.
Yeah,
the mission accomplished.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, come on. That's the cool. Come on. Making firearms has got to be the coolest thing ever. I mean, you just made something.
I'm looking around. I'm like, this is what I made. I designed a sticker, and when it came, I was like, I like playing with it. No, but the idea, I watch a lot of YouTube channels or channels of people making knives, and I was like, if I had that capability and that I would love to make a blade. It would be amazing.
It'd be awesome. Yeah.
So you do this for a little while, and now you got to tell us the day comes. Was this a pre-dawn raid? Did you earn?
Of course, it was a pre-dawn raid. Yeah.
So you live in an apartment building.
It's a brownstone. It's a tenement house. So it's
okay, fine. So they can come in. It's not like they have to go and get past the buzzer and then take an elevator.
Well,
up.
there is a buzzer, but no elevator. It's like 3 floors, above.
How do they get past the buzzer?
Well, they just jack the door. That's all. I mean, they've got the tools to do that, so they just jack the door open, and then they jack the inner door open, and then surprise,
They bust you. Now, what time was it? 6 o'clock.
It's like 6 a.m. or so. Yeah.
Yeah, and wife and kids at home or no?
No, I'm single.
And no dog.
I have a kid, but she doesn't live with me. She lives with my ex-wife. Yeah.
Now tell me, you don't have cats.
No.
Okay, good. Okay, no, you don't have a dog either.
No.
So they bust down the door, scare the shit out of you?
No, actually, I wasn't scared. I was. Well, here's the funny thing. When I heard that dynamic entry cadence, police search warrant, da 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 da, like that whole violence of action thing, I wasn't scared really. Like I thought the first thing I said was, "Hello, hello, hello. My name is Dexter Taylor. I live here. Who are you looking for?" Because I thought they had the wrong house. Like it never would have occurred to me that like they would, like the state of New York would be like, we have to get this guy. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what, really? So yeah, I was genuinely surprised. And then they said, yeah, we're looking for you. Okay, whatever. Pardon me?
Do you pull the whole thing like I'm not saying a word until I get a lawyer?
Well, of course. Well, that's not pulling anything.
No. I didn't mean it in that accusatory manner. I mean, like, or I meant the other way. Like, are you talkative and not taking it seriously?
No. Well, first of all, no, I'm not an idiot. It's like, of course, it's like there's like literally these guys got automatic weapons. They're ready to light me up if I move wrong. It's like, yeah, it's a serious thing. So the guy asked me. I mean, look, it was all very professional, right? It was very courteous and collegial. There were no harsh words exchanged, right? I was very courteous to the police. And, the guy asked me if I wanted, he Mirandized me as he was supposed to. And he said, do you want to talk to us? And I said, no, thank you, sir. I'd like a lawyer. And I also said, but I said, look, if you want to go upstairs to my recording studio, I'll tell you where the keys are on my keychain. Go upstairs and open. Please don't, you don't have to bust the door open upstairs if you don't, just take my key and go up and it's just, because I don't care. It's like they look around and see my mic collection and my recording, my mixing all this same stuff. You know what I'm saying? So I don't care. But yeah, no, I wasn't gonna talk to cops. Like no.
And do they do they go through your whole place, take all the guns and
of course,
and
many of my and pretty much all of my gunsmithing tools as well. Yeah.
Are you there while they're doing this? Like, are you sitting down just watching them ransack your house?
No. I mean, at a certain point, they took me off to the holding facility, and I'm assuming they were there for another few hours. Yeah. So. Wow.
And you say you spend a week at Rikers, and as far as I understand, Rikers is among hellholes, the helliest of the hellholes.
As with many hellholes that people talk about, the hell is unevenly distributed. Right. So, I was lucky enough to jail with some good people. I was lucky enough to jail with some guys who were a little bit older. They were kind of like me. Unlike me, most of them had been in and out of the system for a long time, but that didn't matter to any of us. Certainly didn't matter to me, and so we just, I didn't have to fight anybody, thank God. And so we just hung out there in the dorm and we kept our section clean and hung out in the day room and watched television or hung out and talked to each other. And that was that. So go on, I'm sorry.
They bust your door down, let's say 6 a.m.
Yeah.
You're in a holding cell by what time? When do you see your attorney for the first time?
I don't know. Don't ask me. I didn't have a watch or a phone with me, obviously, so I don't know what happened. I know that by the first time I saw an attorney was that night. So it was a nighttime arraignment, right? That was, and by that time I had already called my ex-wife. She had found a lawyer for me, and he sent someone down to be with me at the arraignment. And that's it. And then I, went off to Rikers, and then some days later, at Rikers, my attorney actually came to Rikers to visit me with another partner from his firm, and we sat and talked for a little bit, and I could see right away that he got it, like he understood what was going on, because he saw that I played it straight with him, that I really did have a clean criminal record, and he understood what I was saying about it being more than just a straight arrest. This was a civil rights matter, and he got it immediately. And he was like, yeah. And of course he saw that I wasn't, that I wasn't some troublemaker. He got that. And he was like, yeah, we won't say too much more. we're gonna get out of here, and then you'll come to my office and we'll talk, and we'll figure out a game plan. So yeah.
What happens at the arraignment? They bring you in front of a judge, and then like what is said and done at that time?
I mean, more or less, they just decide on bail. They say, well, this is what this person's accused of, and they set bail. That's more or less it.
And they set bail at $250,000.
Not quite a quarter. It was $200,000.
Okay. So they say, all right, this is what you're charged with. Post bail of $200,000. And so you're sitting in jail until somebody or you puts up
my
$200,000.
Well, my parents put their house up. That's how I got out.
Wow. And that took time. And so until that time, you're sitting in Rikers just waiting to post bail.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is the food as shitty as everybody says it is in prison?
I mean, it was, to be honest, it wasn't, it depends from day to day, you know. Couple days we had kind of food that was okay. Couple days it wasn't that good, but you know, I mean, like I've got a fear of prison. To me, it's like, seems like, well, I mean, let's just say between prison and jail, right? That was jail, right? Prison is different. So yeah, Riker again, like I said, the hell is unevenly distributed. But listen, I have to, you know, while we're here, I have to say I'm actually grateful to the neighbors I had while I was in Rikers. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm grateful to those men, because the fact is that, like, yeah, everyone had some kind of thing, some rap they were writing, you know, in terms of what got them into there. But the fact is, like, as far like the people I was with there, for the most part, they conducted themselves righteously. And again, that was why, like, there was no hassle, there was no real trouble. I didn't have to fight anybody. It was just everybody was cool, everyone was calm, and like, I am grateful for those, you know, for those people. I don't know if you're a believer or not, but you know, G.K. Chesterton said something about loving your neighbor, about why the scriptures make such a big deal about loving your neighbor. And he said that, you know, your neighbor is the portion of humanity that is given to you. You know, like he said, you make your friends, you make your enemies. But you just have to love your neighbors, because God makes your neighbor. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like that. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, Harlem, Junebug, Pyru, Brooksy, Mr. Creary, you know, it's like Big Maz, you know, these were good men, you know. And again, we most of what we did, we just sat around and shared our stories, you know. And also, there wasn't a lot of excuse making. There wasn't a lot of, well, I don't belong here because this and that. It was like, yeah, I did so and so, and then this and that and this and that, you know.
Wild. And so you and how do you find, like, just practically speaking, you're in jail, you end up posting bond. You don't know. Does someone come and, like, surprise you and unlock the door and say, that's it, you posted bond?
Well, you know, I you know, was on the phone with my parents, and they let me know that they were gonna, you know, they'd found a bail bondsman, they were gonna post bond. So I had some idea that the process was going on. Okay. And so it wasn't surprising. It was like, at a certain point, I was like, okay, I'm probably gonna get out in the next day or two, and then the day came and I was out. Yeah. You keep it.
I mean, maybe this is a stupid question. Do you keep in touch with the guys that you spent the week with?
I kept in touch with a couple of them, but a lot of times, like, these guys, like, their phone numbers will change, you know, because they're using whatever phones and what have you, and they're having ups and downs of life outside, you know, what have you. But okay. You know, I kept in touch with, well, like, one guy in particular, you know, he was married. He was actually married. And so I met his wife, I met his kid, you know, and so, you know, I'd reach out every now and then and just say, hey, how's the family and what have you. Yeah.
So you get out, and that's, I guess, the beginning of the next part of this journey.
Yes, sir.
I don't know how this works. You get charged. Your attorney's got to work with the state, I guess, or the prosecutors to get information, yada, yada. What's the process like right up until the time where you start sitting down for jury selection?
Good question. It was a lot of administrative nonsense, I have to say. Like, when I say nonsense, I mean, early on, my lawyer knew that he would my lawyer decided to file a motion to dismiss on Bruin grounds, on Second Amendment grounds. But that motion to dismiss was driven by a lot of data we didn't have. We had to go and get that data. So, for example, we filed a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information request with the NYPD about their permitting section, because the NYPD's permitting department is notoriously corrupt and and the NYPD slow-walked that data for months, right? And in the meantime, we have a judge who is just insisting that we show up, that we keep coming to court. She's like, okay, she'll set a date. And it's like, listen, Your Honor, we're waiting for this data. Well, I don't care because we can have a trial without the data. It's like, Your Honor, we have to file this motion for it. So it was just a lot of that, like that petty administrative, like process is the punishment kind of thing. It was a lot of that. And then once we did get the data, I wrote a data management stack to process that data into a form that would be useful, to my legal team, basically to munge it into a database. That's open source code, by the way. You can go and download that. And then, we did all that stuff. And then, so it was just, again, this administrative crawl until we filed the motion. And then we got a few steps further along, and it's like, okay, we're going to do this. Okay, finally, are we ready? Yes, we're ready. This and that. And eventually we got to where we are now, which is okay. We're in trial. We started out with one prosecutor and the state changed the prosecutor on us. Probably, as my lawyer thinks, for optical reasons. Yeah.
We'll go on now. I need to know what would have been the optics of the prosecutor.
Well, I mean, my first ADA was a white gentleman, and at a certain point, I think the state understood once the state understood that I wasn't going to plead down. Because remember, the state offered me a plea deal. They said, well, 8 years instead of 18, right? Because I'm looking at 18 years in prison, right? So the state says 8 years, and I was like, no. Like
8 years. You're 53 now, 52.
Right now I'm 53. Yeah.
Can you imagine? I mean, here's 8 years. I don't know how much you have to serve before you can maybe get out before the 8. I don't know how that works. 8 years stolen, and it's not that you're an old man. Period. You're not.
Right.
But 8 years when you're 50 represents a lot more of the rest of your life.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Than 8 years when you're 20.
No, that's
but
right.
It's still theft.
Yeah.
Let's just steal 8 years. Plead down because
It's also theft from my fellow New Yorkers because now they have to pay for my upkeep. I'm an able-bodied man. I'm compos mentis, right? I can work. I can write software. I still do write. I write code every day. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so I could go work for a startup. I could go do whatever, right? I'm able to work, provide for myself. Why are my fellow New Yorkers being required now to pay for my food and my lodging? Because I quietly, privately asserted my Second Amendment rights, harming nobody, threatening nobody. Really? So, yeah, it's weird. It's very weird.
Now, I know this, and I know that you don't want to talk about anything that would relate to future strategy.
Yes.
The motion to dismiss based on constitutional challenge based on Bruin, because Bruin had come out. We've talked about Bruin. Everybody knows what the Bruin Supreme Court decision was. We know what the state of New York said after that. We're gonna circumvent Bruin, and they've been trying it in every other state.
Oh yeah.
What was the outcome of that motion to dismiss on Second Amendment?
It was denied. That's all. They just denied it. Yeah.
How?
And look, well, we knew they would. We knew they would deny it, right? Yeah, they just denied it.
You have you're indicted. You have 37 charges, give or take, or 30 something.
Correct. Yep.
What is the essence of the charges? It's not
you possessed weapons that you manufactured without asking the state of New York for permission. That's the essence. That's it. That's it. Again, it's not you used a weapon. It's not you harmed someone. It's not you. It's, by the way, I have to emphasize, it's not you trafficked a weapon. It's not that you because again, the state of New York knows for a fact. Whatever they're willing to admit, they know because they seized my phone when I got raided. They cloned my phone. I know they cloned my phone. They haven't returned it. They seized my computers when I got raided. They subpoenaed my email records after I got raided. They seized my physical credit cards. They subpoenaed my credit card records from Amex because I had an American Express card, and I would put all my firearms purchases on Amex because I wanted them to be easy to manage. Okay. In fact, just today in court, we had testimony from a representative of American Express who not only canceled my account after a stellar payment record, but essentially ratted me out to the government. Okay. So they know that I wasn't trafficking weapons or doing anything that was a similar type of threat to civic order. Do you know what I'm saying? They know that for a fact. They know I talk to the same 5 or 6 or 7 people. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, they know if they bother to subpoena like the geolocation records from my phone, they know like I don't even go that many places. You know what I'm saying? So they know all that. Again, this is about putting me in my place. That's what this is about. I'm just as you're talking, I'm trying to just find something to explain it. But basically, I mean, if I don't want to get accused of having picked the wrong statute, but bottom line, possessing a firearm, failing to register it. So it's having built your own firearm, and it's an unregistered firearm in the state of New York, and that's a felony. Apparently, you know, again, the idea of having to register your firearms, again,
They got to know where to come, Dexter. I mean, it'll simplify the procedure, Dexter, if they know exactly where they are. This thing up in Canada, like you got to register your firearms, so the government knows exactly where you live. They know exactly who to go after if they want to go for social media posts.
Right.
And if it ever leaks, criminals know exactly where to go to find them and steal them.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, right? It's like, as I try to explain it, because, you know, people will try to say, well, I believe in the Second Amendment, you know. I believe in the Second Amendment, but, and what I say is this, well, we have to decide what words mean. That's what we have to do first. Because are you talking about a right or privilege? Because what the Second Amendment guarantees, and the Second Amendment doesn't bestow a right. The Second Amendment constrains the behavior of the government, of the state. It says, this right adheres to you because you are a human being, right? Because you're a creation. And therefore, the state cannot interfere with it. That's what the 2A says. Now, if people want to tell me, well, yeah, you can own weapons, but first you have to with the government, then what I would say is this, well, now you're talking about a privilege. Now, are you willing to be so loose concerning the boundary between rights and privileges when it comes to other rights which are enshrined in the Constitution? For example, you have the right to freedom of conscience, right? You can declare for Christ if you want, or you can declare that Allah is the one God, whatever you want to do. Okay. Now, do you have to ask the state for permission in order to declare for Christ? No, because it's a right. You have a right to free speech. Do you have to ask the state of New York for permission before you state your opinion about some matter?
They want you to.
Well, yes, but the fact is that no, the answer is no. Why? Because it's a right. Okay, now by contrast, they want to tell you, well, you have to check in with, okay, well then, listen, you want to take a right and turn it into a privilege. Now, we can have that argument, but we have to first concede that that is what you're doing. You want to take away a right and give me back a privilege in return. Now, listen, I personally refuse that bargain. I think that's a terrible bargain. I'm happy with my rights, thank you. And no, I'm not interested in giving them up so you can give me back privileges in return. No, the answer is no.
So they slap on the indictments or the charges. They offer you 8 years. At one point, from what I understand, they were so generous they offered you a 5-year deal.
5-year one, yeah. That was an informal offer. Yes, that was in the window. And I turned that one down flat too. Yeah.
And now so now you're going to trial now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Now, what was the jury impaneling like?
Well,
By the way, I don't. You're allowed talking about this, right? Like,
pardon me?
You're allowed.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I should say, I can tell you that that the prosecution tried to shut me up.
Mm-hmm.
The prosecution tried to get the judge to admonish me not to go on social media and talk about this case. And to her credit, she refused. I mean, it would have been extraordinary if she had, issued a gag order of some kind. They said it wasn't a gag order, but it was a gag order without a difference. Of course, if they say, "Well, we don't want to issue a gag order, but we want you to tell the defendant not to talk about the case," well, that's a gag order. I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, yeah. So you asked about the jury process. Well, here's the funny thing. I like the jury we have, believe it or not. But it's also true that you can't really say it's a jury of my peers. Like, there's no black men on this jury. I'm sorry. I think at least one or two would be nice, The prosecution went out of their way to keep certain kinds of people off this jury. So the jury we have is mostly women with I think it's three guys on it, 3 men.
It's a jury of 10, right?
It's 12.
12. Okay,
12,
so
yeah.
9 women, 3 men.
Correct.
Racial breakdown. I don't like asking these questions, but
It's mostly the women are mostly black West Indian, some West Indian women and some Black American women, and then one woman who is Hispanic.
Okay.
And then the 3 guys. One guy, I'm not sure he's Hispanic in some kind, and the other 2 guys are looks like of European extraction, both Jewish.
Okay.
So again, it was obvious to us that they were trying to get a certain outcome during voir dire. But like I said, I actually like this jury. I do, because they seem to be all kind of working people. Like people who, in other words, people whose money doesn't work for them, they work for their money. Do you know what I'm saying?
People who might have to take the subway and see.
That's exactly what I told my attorney. I said, you know something? These people, the people on this jury, take the subway every day. You know what I'm saying? They know what the subway is like. They know what the streets of New York are like. They go home and they watch the news every night. You know what I'm saying? They know what this city is like. And now the prosecution has to convince these 12 people, these 12 New Yorkers, that I am a threat to public safety. I am a threat to civic order, such that I need to get put away for 18 years. But let me back up a second, because the jury, the prosecution and the court do their best to insulate the jury from knowledge of what the sentence would actually be. Mm-hmm. So there's all these mandatory minimums and stuff like that. But they don't want the jury to know about what the sentence would be, because people's conscience, they ironically, they don't want people to listen to their conscience. That's really it. I mean, that's it.
The funny thing is, as you talk, I'm thinking, if you had gotten charged after Trump, I think you might have been gagged, because I think that glass has been broken. That standard of the process has now been disregarded.
Wait. If I had gotten charged after Trump,
after the gag orders that New York issued against Trump in the context of his prosecution, gag orders, I think, now have been normalized to the public, where people are not even finding them as outrageous as they ought to. When Stone was gagged, I don't think people knew about it to be outraged. But I think now it's almost been normalized to the point where I think the standard might have been different for any judge assessing that, where they might have thought, okay, well, hey, they did it to this guy, the biggest, the most important guy in America. We can do it to the lowly hoi polloi. So they don't gag you. You have the jury selection. You're in trial now. How long is the trial scheduled to last?
Might go another week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. Who knows?
Now, you say the concern that I have is you say that the Crown, I say the Crown, I'm Canadian.
Crown,
Canadian. The prosecution. Sorry,
you red coat. I'm getting some red coat energy from you, which is a problem.
I left. I left. So that's. But now the prosecution. You say the prosecution is going to have to convince the jury that you're such a threat. Yada yada. Is there not a risk that they're just going to have to say you broke the black and white letter of the law and there's nothing to think about?
First of all, of course, I mean, you say, isn't there a risk? Like, this is all risk.
So,
I mean,
isn't the most
turtles,
obvious thing?
It's turtles all the way down. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, yes, it's all risk. That's life.
Because they're going to come in and say the statute says X, Y, and Z.
I know. Listen, you don't have to tell me. That's what they already said. Right? Okay.
And I don't want to ask because I know you don't
ask, but I'm not. You can ask, but I'm not going to answer.
All right.
In other words, like, I'm not going to put it this way. I'm not going to say anything about our strategy or what Venu plans to say or plans to do or who. Like, none of that. I'm not
because you're not yet at the point where you're presenting a defense. Right now, it's still prosecution.
Well, even when we're presenting the defense, I'm not going to telegraph. Put it this way. Here's what's funny. Here's a really funny thing. My lawyer is actually. He's like he's an American of Indian extraction. He's a Catholic and he's a boxer. So I got like a Catholic boxer in my corner. So I'm not gonna telegraph his punches. You feel me? Like, not gonna do it. I will say that, like, he's first rate. Like, he's an amazing. It's like the first couple times I saw him work in open court, I was like, yeah, okay, yeah. Yep.
Now, I know I can ask you this because I think you talked about it with Alison Morrow. The constitutional challenge argument will come up, but from what I understand, can only come up on appeal and will not be able to come back up until that time?
Well, put it this way. We've already made the constitutional challenge in our Bruin motion, right? So the judge has said that we may not talk about... She's admonished my lawyer. I'm not sure whether she was admonishing me directly, because I mean, it would be a little bit beyond the pale for her to tell me that I can't say the words Second Amendment when I testify. That would be odd. You know what I'm saying? Like, usually it's like you're telling the lawyer what questions he can and cannot ask. But again,
the judge said you can't. The lawyer cannot mention the word Second Amendment.
Yes.
That doesn't make that doesn't, even to this red code Canadian, that makes no sense. Everybody knows it. It's like, it's not an elephant in the room. It's lexicon 101.
Right. But remember that this is, the whole structure is designed so that no one can challenge these laws. Listen, I just talked to my buddy Jeff Charles, who did an excellent write-up of my case on Red State, and who also sat and talked with him on his Fresh Perspective podcast. Jeff Charles, amazing human being, and his better half, Donnie the Don. But no, I just talked with him about, and here's the analogy. Here's, I think, the right analogy. Let's say that New York State, because, you know, Governor Kathy Hochul is big on the black codes. She seems to have a thing. She's kind of got a thing for Jim Crow. I don't get it, but so be it. So let's say New York State signed something into law that said, or enacted a law that said, all black people have to enter public buildings through the colored entrance. Let's say they just did that. Right? Okay. Now, first of all, you can't, as a conscientious citizen, you can't just challenge that law because you don't have standing. You have to now prove that you have been materially harmed by that unconstitutional law in order to challenge it in court. And unless you violated the law or done something, you don't have standing. Okay. So now what they're telling you what you have to do is, you have to now go into a public building and refuse to use the colored entrance, at which point, presumably, you would get arrested for criminal trespass. Now, once you're arrested for criminal trespass and you're tried, right, in your trial, you can't mention the fact that segregation is against the Constitution, because that's not what this trial is about. This trial, sir, is to determine whether you engage in criminal trespass because you took your black ass in the building and the colored entrance is over here. You refuse to go into the colored entrance. So that's what this trial is about. You can't talk about desegregation and the Constitution. No. Was this a colored entrance? Did you take your black ass in through the white entrance? Okay, then you're guilty. And then you have to go through that process and shut up about desegregation and about civil rights and then get convicted and imprisoned. And then on appeal, that's when you're allowed to bring up the fact that we dispensed with this segregation business some time ago and the Constitution forbids it. Now, aside from the fact that we're talking about segregated entrances as opposed to the Second Amendment, that is exactly the situation we're in right now. That is the situation.
It's wild. I think I can understand the legalese of why is that the unconstitutionality is a question of law for the judge or for the higher courts and not for a jury. I mean, if I try to steelman it that way, but bottom line, you can't raise that argument during the trial. So it's almost a fait accompli, which is our third French term of the night.
Nice.
You're going through the trial right now, and prosecution is presenting its evidence.
Yeah.
And so what they've got to validate their warrant. They've got to validate the search forms of the documents that they've obtained from the phone companies.
They're basically going through and saying, with these, it's funny because a whole bunch of stuff we don't dispute. Like, were these his guns? Yes. Why? Because they were in the apartment. So it's just, they're just going through that whole litany.
Okay. And then you're going to present a defense. We can maybe catch up afterwards when that happens.
Yes,
but the bottom line, you're out until they render a verdict and a judge determines whether or not you're out pending appeal, because I presume one way or the other, there might not be an appeal.
I'm sure there's, if we'll put it this way, in the worst case scenario, there will be an appeal. But yeah, if the verdict is adverse, right, I think there's close to zero chance I'll get bail on appeal. Because remember, the point here is, how can I put this? The point, according to the people in charge of New York State, how can I put this as delicately as possible?
Bearing in mind, prosecution is probably
their point. Don't warn me about nothing. Don't worry about it. I know they're watching. That's their business. That's their problem. Now, how can I put this as delicately as possible? Yes, New York State's point is that uppity Negroes must hang. That's what New York State's point is, right? They want to make an example. Don't you black people ever defy us. We're here to protect you. We can't have you protecting yourself. We can't have you being independent. We can't have all this Constitution business. Yeah? So just shut up, stay in your place, do as you're told. So if one of us decides to, quietly and peaceably assert his Second Amendment rights in his house, being a law-abiding citizen with no criminal record, that's a problem. And that guy has to be made to pay. So, long story short, if the verdict does not go my way, I'll pretty much be taken off to I predict I'll be taken off to Rikers immediately until sentencing, and then I'd be taken upstate. Now, don't ask me what chance I think we have. I have no idea. And I don't care. You understand what I'm saying? It's like you already saw that I refused the plea deal, right? So I'm reconciled. I am here now because A, I'm reconciled, but B, this case is not just about me. Right? And the one thing, of course I don't want to go to prison. But beyond that, what I don't want is, if I do go to prison, for it not to mean anything. And so this is why it's really important to me for conservatives to understand that, we have to change our approach. There is no good reason, why progressives should be running all our great American cities. And the reason they are running our great American cities into the ground is in large part because supposed conservatives have refused to acknowledge that our great American cities are, in fact, American cities. You see, I believe we're in a war for our American civilization. That's what I think, you know? And so if it's a war, if it's really about that, if you're really playing for all the marbles, then you need all your people. And we need to start getting good at building political coalitions. And listen, building political coalitions does not mean inviting a bunch of PayPal conservatives up on the stage to talk to me and to talk to my people about a noun, a verb, and plantation. That's bullshit. And that kind of bullshit is in part why we're in the state we're in now. We have conservatives, we have people who are actually, you know, part of news organizations and have staffs and have researchers and can't read a goddamn election turnout graph. Huh? We have people who work for conservative news organizations going to Philadelphia and not visiting Maj Touré, who don't know anything about who choose not to know anything about the Solutionary Center. Huh? We have people like Sonny Johnson, yeah, who was only invited to CPAC once and then never again because they didn't like what she had to say. But she's one of the real ones. She's one of the real ones who gets it about black folks' conservative heritage in this country. She gets it about Frederick Douglass. She gets it about Booker T. Washington. She gets it about the fact that our great civil rights leaders were all packing. She gets it about the fact that the Second Amendment especially means a lot to us as Americans. Yeah? And there is no reason, in my opinion, why we shouldn't be building coalitions that are strong enough to overwhelm all these progressives. Because, you know, these progressives, I mean, come on, you've seen them. They're not that bright. They're not that charismatic. They're not that good looking. They don't have great ideas. They have a lot of money behind them, but that's more or less it. But, you know, working class people outnumber the elites everywhere, all the time. Working class people outnumber the elites. So what's the problem? The problem is you don't know who your allies are. So what I want more than anything else, I mean, of course I want to keep my freedom, and God willing, I will. But if it please God that I be imprisoned, then so be it. I'm ready. Yeah? But all I want is for my fellow conservatives to get a clue and to realize that this is a fight for our country, not for some corner of our country. Yeah, it's not, the whole thing isn't supposed to be that you have some Ayn Rand, some Atlas Shrugged moment, and you retreat to your mountain stronghold and laugh while the whole thing burns. There is no mountain stronghold for you, bro. Like these people who are governing us right now in this country sent helicopter gunships to the Hindu Kush. Huh? They tried to conquer Afghanistan. You think they care that you moved to Arizona and they're going to leave you alone? No, we have to fight these people everywhere politically in order to be safe anywhere. And once we get that basic thing down, and once we get right with that challenge, you know, then like things are going to change for us. But we're being tested, in my opinion. We're being tested. And the test, I didn't make the test up. It's not some recent thing. Its test is 2,000 years old. You know what I'm saying? Like the rabbi came 2,000 years ago and said, hey, who's your neighbor? Yeah. You can keep the law. Yeah. Okay. Who's your neighbor? Can you love each other? Yeah, I know you can keep the law. Yeah. Okay, fine. Can you love each other? You're called to love your neighbor. Listen, the injunction doesn't say, it doesn't have a caveat like if your neighbor is lovable. You're called to love your neighbor. So I'll finish with this. You know, we're being besieged from all sides here in this country, in our civilization. We're being besieged from all sides because we have bad ideas and bad people and bad things rushing to fill a vacuum. And that's what it's like when something rushes to fill a vacuum. The question we have to ask ourselves is what occupied the space where that vacuum is now? What used to occupy that space? And why was it done away with? Who allowed it to be done away with? And how can we get it back? I believe we can get it back. But upstream of all this stuff about politics and this and that and the precinct strategy and can we do this and elect this guy, upstream of all of that is an act of theological imagination. who is my neighbor. And that's it. We are going to love each other in this civilization or perish. That's the choice. There is no other option. God became man, God became flesh and lived among you, and he closed every other door. That's the option. Love each other or perish. And that's it.
You're back in trial tomorrow morning.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I'm not going to keep you longer than this, and also
I'll be up till about midnight. Don't worry.
Well, also, I was going to say I can't think of a better way to end this interview. Dexter, is there anything that I don't think I didn't ask you, but is there anything that I should have asked you that you think we need to know that I didn't?
I don't think so. I mean,
you covered some serious ground.
I should say, well, first of all, above all, I have to say thank you. I mean, the idea that I'm on a podcast with Viva Fry. That's awesome. I mean,
Dexter, now that you mention, I think I remember the name Carbon Mike from a while back, but it's
probably
piece things together.
Well, probably because maybe you remember it because when the Canadian trucker protest kicked off, right, when they drove across the continent, the Foundation Society, which is my outfit, we actually spun up a 1-800 number. And so truckers who were on the line in Ottawa could reach out to us. Even if they didn't have internet, they could just call a toll-free number. And I actually had a conversation. I recorded an interview with one of the young men, this trucker from Saskatchewan, who was on the line there in Ottawa in his truck. So you might have known me from that.
I'm gonna go back and refresh my memory. That might very well be it. That's amazing. It's a small world, especially when the internet connects everybody.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I can't think of anything else. I thank you so much. And again, we've tagged a lot of conservative pundits and podcasters and so on and so forth. Relatively few, have reached back out, and you're one of those few.
Well, I don't know that I'm conservative. I think I'm. I'm joking about that, but
more to your credit if you're not, right?
No, but the bottom line is we get inundated. Like there's too many injustices to even address in a given day, and some are. You have to have an interest in them, and you have to know that they exist, and those two things don't always collide. I did not know about the details of this story. Allison covered it. She's like, dude, and I was like, I didn't know about the details, and it's wild and it's offensive. And then I hear you explain it, and I appreciate the broader application than just an injustice against you. It's a fundamentally important issue, and it's part and parcel of the war on all of the rights, the God-given rights that they're trying to turn into privilege.
Yes, sir. 100%. So like I said, I've had endless enjoyment watching you and Barnes, just chop it up on all these issues and stuff like that. So I never imagined that I'd actually be on a podcast with Viva Fry.
And
awesome.
I'm gonna say, like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it up to New York out of fear, but we will meet at some point in time. Dexter, I know that the Give, Send, Go is one thing I'm gonna blast around now.
Yes, sir.
Where can people find you, and what can they do to support you above and beyond the obvious of helping with your defense fund?
Sure. I would say the number one thing they can do is spread the word, right? The optics of this case, right, when people dig into it. And by the way, I encourage everyone to, to elevate their skepticism. If people look at this and they're like, well, that seems scandalous, but I don't know, maybe he was trafficking weapons. Well, feel free to dig in and, do your background research, do your due diligence, right? But once you've satisfied yourself that this case really is what it seems to be, and that I really am what I seem to be, if and when you satisfy yourself that is the case, the number one thing you can do is spread the word. Because New York State is and the people who run New York State, more importantly, are counting on no one paying attention. They're counting on no one caring. They're counting on this being a cost-free excursion into totalitarianism. Do you know? No, we're just gonna defy the highest court in the land. We'll defy the Constitution. And I think Kathy Hochul said, by the time someone challenges it, it'll be years before someone challenges it. She was
they say the quiet part out loud every now and again.
Sir. Right. So the one thing, so if they're saying the quiet part out loud, then we need to just stay loud. We need to just point this out and just pay attention. Attention is the thing. And so I would say spread the word. If you know podcasters, if you know people who are, if you have people in your circle who have bigger microphones and bigger cameras and what have you, just spread the word. I'm delighted to talk to people about this case. But I would say also, do it with due haste, because keep in mind this trial is only going to go on like another week, maybe 2 weeks and max.
That's it. Yeah. And deliberation is hours or days at best. It's not like a judge writing it.
Correct. So it's not. I think some people think, well, that's next month I'll get on. Yeah. It's like, no. It's like people have to actually spread the word right now.
And the funny thing is, I was just listening to Martin Luther King's letter. I was listening to it because I don't read anymore, letters from Birmingham. And he talked about I think he was referencing, it was either Luther's going back, the moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. And not to say that that's what you were doing. Yeah. But it's to say that everybody says, well, that's the law of the land and just follow the laws of New York and things will be fine, as if it's not going to be one law after another law after another law. More laws, less justice is Marco Tullius, I think.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is the thing. It's like, to your point, there has to be, I personally believe in law as such, man's law as such. I believe in courts as such. I'm not mad at the fact that we have this system. I think it's wonderful. But the problem is things have to be in their right place. You have to put first things first. There is a law that's higher than the law of men. There has to be. Otherwise, on what basis do you challenge an unjust law? Right? I mean, segregation was the law at some point. Slavery was the law at some point, right? Okay, so on what basis do you challenge a law that is unjust? If not on the basis of a theological law from which man's law is downstream.
At least in this context, it's an easier argument than a theological law, because you have the Constitution of the United States of America, and it either means something or it doesn't. And a lot of people are trying to just weather it down so that it's a tattered rag and not the law, the supreme law of the land.
Yes, sir. And if human beings don't stand up and defend that document, as you said, the principles, then it becomes a dead letter, becomes a dead formula. So that's the thing. I love the fact that we have that document, but it's important that people know that document will not defend itself. That document is simply, some principles crystallized. It's people standing up for those principles that make it into a living thing, and so that's what we got to do.
All right. That is perfect. Dexter, stick around. We'll say our proper goodbyes. Everyone out there, thank you all for being here. Snip, clip, share away. And we'll see who with the bigger bullhorn we can get to understand what's going on and Dexter, and hopefully have you on. But we'll work on that. Thank you very much. Stick around. Everyone else, I'll see you all tomorrow.